So hello and welcome to the update 3 on our model railway for complete beginners. And I've said for a while that what we're going to do is look at how we paint some of the buildings. So this was the station building that I painted, and then obviously we had our platforms here, and we've got a few other bits as well. Now what I'm going to show you is basically how I've done some of the effects, because just painting a building is not that tricky. So I don't think you need to see me actually just painting the base colours. Now what I would say is you don't have to do the techniques I'm doing. You can see here I've just painted a grey to look like blue bricks and a brick red. And quite frankly, it's your railway. And if you're happy with that, and why not, that's more than adequate. And the same really goes for the platforms. You could just paint the tops grey and the walls brown or red and the edge white and be quite happy. But what I'm going to do is just show some of the techniques that I've used to give a bit more detail, particularly on the walls and roofs. Now all I did to practice, I'm not using the back of my station building, it's up against the baseboard, the back scene. So you can see here where I've practiced different techniques, and I've actually saved the windows for other projects. And I did exactly the same on the platform. These are all my various attempts to get it right. Now, you'll have seen where I did the cattle dock that I did the whitewash, but I wasn't as happy with that on the platforms. It gives a very washed out look, which is right for a cattle dock because they were washed with lime, but I wasn't quite so pleased. But what I'm going to do, I'll just show you the white technique here, and then I'll show you what I actually did. Now I used brown, I just used Humbrol 29, I've got some hull red or brick red here. Now I've been using model paints because that's what I've got. These are about £3 a tub. This is artist acrylic, this is Poundland, so that was £1. That's got 120, that's got 10. Even the posh artist acrylics, this will be about £3 or £4 with 10 times as much as these. I've experimented, and Nick Holloway, one of our members, has tried the same thing, and this works fine. You might need a couple of coats, so I would suggest if you're new to this, don't go and buy 6 or 7 £3. Go and buy some cheap acrylic paint and use that. Brushes wise, I'm just using a mix of artists and Humbrol brushes. I tend to use 1s, 2s, perhaps of 3 for bigger areas, but it's whatever you want to use. But don't try and skimp on brushes. Cheap brushes are too hard. Get some decent brushes. 1 or 2 decent brushes are much better. So let's have a quick look then at what we're going to do on the brick. Now you can use white modelling paint, you can use white poster paint, works quite well. You do need to make sure that this dries at least overnight, otherwise you tend to rub it off. And all I'm going to do is work in white paint to the bricks, nothing too complicated, like that. There we go. Now I've experimented and experimented, I've tried it wet, I've tried letting it dry, which tends to rub the red off, and so far I've found the best thing is just almost as soon as you put it on, and I tend to find a downward motion is best. A little bit of lick on the bits you don't particularly want, but you can see there that that gives you a brick mortar effect, and that's actually how I did my station. Except I did it over the grey as well. That's just trying to get the angles right for the camera for you. So that's how you can do the platforms if you want, and I did the stations like that. If you use a darker colour, then obviously when it washes out, it doesn't go too pale. So that's how I basically did my station building. Not real rocket science. It does take a bit of practice, but as I say, that's what your back of your station building or your back of your platform's for. Just do that other bit there. It is a good idea to have everything you want around you, so I've got my jam jar full of water there to wash my brush out. And again, we're just going to get this Now that I do find in the edges it tends to sit, and if you rub too much you rub the paint off, so you do need to be quite gentle with it, but it's just practice. So that's how I did the brickwork on the station, although I will reiterate again, there's absolutely nothing to stop you not doing that. And one of the other options I've discovered I've got some old Dapol stations, so I've been practicing. This is just painted a stone colour and grey. Now, I'm quite sure, I believe it's the Great Western used to paint their buildings, and certainly a lot of the buildings, Southern Railway and things, were painted, and I think that looks fine. There's no need to do a stone effect. They painted their walls. We all do it on other buildings. It's your railway. And I'm quite happy with that, and I'm actually going to repaint this whole station with that. So again, you don't need to do the brick effects if you don't want to. So what I then did for my station platform, they tend to get very dirty. You don't necessarily see the brick courses anyway, and it is a little bit out of sight. So basically what I did is I got some grey paint, and I used the dry brush technique. So dry brush, big flat dry brush, but it wants to be a very stiff brush with flat bristles on the end. And all you do is dip a bit of paint, you don't need too much on it, dab it off in a tissue, do it on the bottom of whatever you're doing, and just run it over the brickwork. And actually mine's gone a little dry. It is just practice, because you don't want to make it grey. That's still a bit much. There we go. Now what that does, and I'll try and show you in a minute, try and show you up close, because it's all quite subtle, but it picks the brickwork out, it picks the pillars out, just stops it looking quite so painted. And then all I did after that, to pick out the highlights a little bit more, was get a paler colour. I used emulsion actually. This is just a light grey emulsion. Exactly the same technique. And then what you can see there is, again, it's just picking the pillars out. And in fact, if comes out a bit much, you can just brush it off with your fingers. And it also picks out a little bit of the brickwork detail. And with all of this, if it goes horribly wrong, you just repaint it and do it again. So difficult to see, but you can see where it's picked the detail out. And that's what I did on mine, and I was quite happy with that. So that then brings us to the platform top. And we're going to do exactly the same technique as we did on the brickwork. But what I found with this is, because we've got two distinct ways of the courses going, I do all the bits this way first, and all I'm doing is painting in white model paint into what would be the mortar. You can see how we've done that there. Little bit of lick. And then that leaves you in the marks that way. That one's got a bit much. There we go. And then what we'll do is we'll do the ones going the other way. Like that. Excuse me if I go quiet when I'm working, I'll concentrate. Now it does leave a bit of a white residue, but of course that adds to the texture of the stone. And there you can see we've got the beginnings of what we've got there, which is our flagstones. And it looks quite nice. And while we've got the white paint out, we're just going to do our platform edges. Now I understand these were actually done in real life in some stations with a big broom that was cut to an L shape, and they dumped it in paint, and then each morning or once a week or whatever they ran it along the edge of the platform. Now because I'm rushing it a bit, I've got a little bit of white paint there, but that's not a problem, we can just paint that out. And there you go, you see I've only got an inch there, but that's my platform done. We've got all our brickwork picked out, we've got our stone picked out, and it's that simple to get a nice effect. So whilst you can just paint it and not worry about some of the weathering, I would persevere with it. It's also worth pointing out that when you're going to paint these, do all your windows and doors separately. I painted all the windows white, all the doors this quite nice 1950s British Railway green kind of colour. And then you stick them on at the end, and then you don't worry about getting paint everywhere. Same with things like the drain pipes. And as I say, you can see on mine where I've done dark grey at the bottom to look like blue bricks. So those are the techniques I use to paint the station and the platform. And that then brings us to the roofs. So there's a couple of techniques with the roofs. This one, I did dark grey with just a dry brush, and I'll show you that. But I've been experimenting on some others with doing a light grey and then a dark wash and then a dry brush. So we'll show you that as well. So the dark wash is quite simple. If I can find my black paint. All you're going to do is put a little bit of black paint. I use the lid of my jam jar. And we're just going to mix that with water. There are lots of different ways of painting buildings, and everybody will have their favourite, and I'm sure lots of people are, as I say this, banging out messages to say I'm doing this wrong or there's a better way. I think what is, you've got to do what works for you, and this is what works for me. And all we're doing is putting this on, and when it dries, it will have settled in a lot of the little cracks and creases. And then you just do a dry brush from there. So that's if you want to do a black wash. I didn't bother on my station actually, I just did the dry brushing. So let's show you that. Again, I just used a light colour. Now this is, you have to have a bit of patience with this because you really do want just a very, very dry brush, because all we're trying to do, and be quite gentle, all we're trying to do here is pick up, and so you run up the roof because that's the way the detailing goes. And if you push harder, you get a bit more paint on. And you can see that what that does is it picks up the detail. I've got a bit heavy-handed there, but you can just rub it and it will come off. There we go. And I would say, even if you were just going to paint your roof grey, I would just do this because you can see the difference there, that you've got all the detail of the roof picked out. And then I'll show you the black wash working on this area as well. Now this works better on here because it's a lighter grey. And you use a lighter grey because the black will turn it darker. Just like that. But it's which technique you want. And then a few little details that probably aren't quite so apparent is that, for instance, what I've done is I picked the ridge tiles out in a dark red, the same colour as I did the brickwork. Now when you've weathered it, it's less obvious, but what is nice is when you've weathered it and then you dry brush it, all the little ridges get picked out in a little bit of light grey, and it's then quite a nice detail. So it's just little details like that that make the difference. You'll find that you can make the buildings quite quickly. I didn't talk about making these, to be honest, because the instructions are really simple for the platform and the station. The instructions for a canopy, I bought the Daypole canopy, are completely different, and the Daypole rail bus was a nightmare. But these buildings are really simple. You don't really need to show me how to stick 4 walls together. And what I did is I stick the walls together and then I start painting. But it did take me probably 3 evenings to get that to that level. But I quite like doing the painting techniques. So there you go. I've shown you how we do the brickwork for the station, the brickwork for the platforms. I was picking the wrong piece up. That's my test piece. Right, I've shown you how we do the brickwork for the station, the brickwork for the platforms, the top of the platforms, the edges, how we get the paint effects here, or how you can use alternative effects. And we've shown you our roofs. Black wash and then dry brushed, or just dry brush, which I think probably is best. And you can do a lighter colour and then dark wash. But to be honest, I think the best is just the dark grey and then a light grey wash, light grey dry brush. But it's all up to you. They're your buildings. You paint them bright pink with blue spots on if that's what you want to do. It's your buildings. The other buildings that you've seen, like the coal order office signal box, they're very simple because they're just one colour with the roofs done. And what we'll also do is a video on how we convert the signal box. But that's the basis then of how I painted these buildings and these platforms. Have a bit of fun. As I say, you've got the back of your platforms and your back of your buildings to practice on if you're doing this layout. And in any case, if you paint one and it doesn't work, just repaint it and start again. But as I say, don't feel that you've got to do a lot of techniques. Just paint them a couple of base colours if that's what you want. Couple of things I've noticed with the windows, a lot of people stick them on the wrong way round. I think they're better stuck on the inside, sticking out, not stuck on the outside. And I've noticed that on a few daypole buildings. So there we go. That's how we paint our buildings on our model railways. I haven't shown you the good shedding thing, as I say. So we'll just show you these. All I've done is the dark wash and dry brush technique on the roof. The rest of these are just two colours. I haven't weathered it because I like the finish, and very carefully with a fine brush pick the green out. And exactly the same, what's going to be our signal box, in fact, just paint the walls a colour and then dry brush the roof. Very quickly as well, don't forget to pick your gutters out in black on the station bit on any of your buildings. They look really effective. You just need to run a little black brush around just to pick the gutters out. There we go. I hope you've enjoyed that. I know a number of you are actually following the series, which is great. And we'll have another update out soon. Stay safe and look after yourselves. Goodbye. Hi, thanks for watching the video and for the nice comments. Click on the left for a previous video in this series, click on the right for another video you might enjoy, and please don't forget to click to subscribe, like, comment, etc. Thanks again.